So vendor portals, procurement to payables. We're really going to talk about vendor portals, and we kind of break that out into two different categories. And lots of you have probably been exposed to vendor portals and been on webinars or seen presentations or discussions. And vendor portals can take on many different meanings and many different things to different people. So for purposes of today and what we're going to talk about and focus in, let's look at two different areas that we're going to go ahead and focus our efforts on. First one being administrative vendor management. So those are those activities of onboarding a new vendor, very administrative in nature, collecting data, verifying data, doing all your validations, all the ongoing maintenance and administration that comes to place with vendors when they have a change of address, change of remit to, insurance expirations, licensing, things of that nature. And then the vendor messaging, the back and forth that takes place with your vendors where you're trying to communicate information to them and vice versa. And again, we can use portals to really automate a lot of that, and you'll see that today. The second half of the equation on vendor portals is transactional vendor management. It's all that transaction intense activities. Tends to be, both purchasing and accounts payable focused. So I'll actually start at the bottom of this little list here, but certainly from a purchasing standpoint, once you've onboarded the vendor, then you're going to actually start transacting with them. Probably the first thing you're going to do is you're going to send out some RFPs or RFQs, whatever the case may be. So we have the tools through the vendor portal. We can use that to dispatch those RFPs and RFQs out to them, as well as update them, message them, any changes or updates to those RFXs. Very similar functionality along with purchase orders. Once you select a vendor, you want to submit or dispatch a purchase order. Again, you can use your vendor portal if you're not already having some automated way of doing that. Really is a very efficient means of dispatching purchase orders out to the suppliers that you want to dispatch them to. And then again, update those purchase orders as things change, dates change, things of that nature. Have the ability to have a very interactive updating process to where you're communicating with your vendors so that when things are coming, the shipment's going to be made on time, and you can have that kind of dialogue back and forth, and we'll certainly see that in the demos. Excuse me. The next part of that really is the payables kind of focused transactions. Web invoice submit, the ability to use vendor portals to accept invoices through the web, as well as credit memos and other related documents. Online payment inquiry. Instead of having people call into a vendor services or a payables department, they can go right online and find out the status of a payment, where it's at, has it been rejected, when's it going to get paid, what check number, things of that nature. Any disputes they may have with payment, they can submit and track online and kind of follow that through the process, as well as dynamic discounting and other supply chain finance types of vehicles that you may want to use, again, which are becoming very popular today. So as you can see, there's a lot to it, a lot to cover today. So the demos, we're going to get into it, and then you're going to see that. Now we're going to talk about the vendor portals, procurements to payables, and some of the features of the vendor portals that you're going to see today and that we've been talking about. We really break it down into two kind of categories: the administrative types of activities that take place with your vendors, where you can use portals to automate those processes and make those more efficient, as well as the transactional side of the house. We have a lot of transactional activities between purchasing and payables, and again, requires a level of automation and efficiency that certainly portals can accommodate, and that's what we try to do. Looking first at the administrative side of the house, again, those are things like onboarding new vendors. As many of you certainly know, onboarding new vendors requires gathering a lot of data, gathering documents, validating that information to make sure they are, in fact, where they say they are and where they're at and what kind of products and services they supply, and all of that information and data that you have to collect. And then once you onboard those vendors, certainly you have the administrative function of administering and maintaining those vendors, throughout your relationship with them. So that's things like, obviously, any kind of change of address, remittance, banking information, payment information that may change, that becomes very important, as well as certainly insurance expirations, licensing expirations, all those kinds of activities that you need to track and stay on top of And of course, vendor messaging, the vehicle by which you can communicate back and forth in a very collaborative fashion with your vendors and suppliers to notify them when things are going to expire, to get message and pass data and documents as well back and forth. The second part of that is the transactional side of the house, and that really is procurement, purchasing, payables, where you have a lot of things going back and forth, a lot of transactions taking place. So whether that's RFXs, RFQs, RFPs, whatnot, a way to dispatch those out to the potential suppliers that you've onboarded already, and providing updates to those RFXs as things may change, dates may change, whatever the case may be. As well as when you now decide to dispatch a purchase order, to have a very efficient way of using the portal to dispatch purchase orders out to your suppliers. Again, communicate updates to them, get updates back from them, and we'll see a lot of that. There's a lot of flexibility there and some things that you can do that really do make the process much more efficient. Let's take a real quick look at RFQs, and I'll show you what we mean. So you go into this section, and you will notice here there's a lot of information on the screen. So if you're going to go out and you want to put out an RFQ, you can go ahead and dispatch that RFQ by going into your list of names, the names of vendors. So if you have a particular product that you want and you want to send out RFQs to that vendor, and again, there's a lot of names in here. So let's just for the sake of argument, say you sent this RFQ out to 50 different companies or 20 different companies. So you'll see them displayed here. These are the companies you sent them out to, and then you'll see a status there. You'll see status new, acknowledged, and what that simply means is that thing is going out to potential suppliers and vendors that you want to submit an RFQ. They're going to get a copy of that RFQ, and then depending on what they do with it, if they ignore it, then it's going to say new. And why that's important is, again, some of the back-end stuff that we've talked about, there's timers on this. If it's important to you, and it's going to be more important in PO than it certainly is in RFQ, but if it's important to you that these people respond and stay on top of things, you can tell by the fact that it's in a new state that nobody has actually looked at it yet. So there can actually have timers on there, which once again can trigger an email either to a buyer and or to the prospective supplier to say, hey, we sent you an RFQ, you haven't done anything with it, could you please check it out. If you were to click that, we're not going to click the PDF, I don't want to take time, because it's just going to be a standard RFQ. But once you clicked it, then you would have some decisions to make. You could either acknowledge it, you could reject it, or you could just look at it and say, hey, I'll worry about it later. And you'll see those statuses reflected in the status column there. So then you at least know, okay, they've acknowledged it, they've looked at it, they've opened it and viewed it, but they haven't really given me any information, or perhaps they don't care to participate and they've decided to reject it. So the information that you see is really, there's a lot of information here, and you can have more or you can have less. Jason, anything you want to add down here?
Sure. Once again, there's some stuff happening in the background. Jim mentioned some, obviously the time-related actions that we've been talking about, but also we also understand that you want to interact with your suppliers in a kind of frictionless way, and sometimes that just means you send out an RFQ via email, and you want them to be able to respond via email. We can support that as well. So if you want them to be able to acknowledge receipt, we can support that. If you want them to be able to say, I'm definitely in, and here's my responding documents, we can support that as well. So, and of course, naturally, we can support them coming into the portal and providing that stuff in the sort of the traditional online way. But again, the idea is to not put the portal front and center between you and your suppliers, but to allow it to help you have this frictionless relationship, particularly in the transactional areas.
Super, appreciate that, Jason. Yeah, and you'll see add attachment, which is another one. They can add attachments that may be important to you, or even their response. So let's move on to the PO dispatch, which is going to look very, very similar and have very similar functionality to what we just talked about. Now, again, in this case, you're dispatching purchase orders out to your vendor, and the way this process is going to work, when you decide who you're going to send this purchase order to, it's going to go into the address book, and it's going to send an email link, which they will then come into your portal. So they're going to be notified, hey, you have a purchase order waiting for you. Once again, they can come in. They can view that purchase order, and once again notice the status bar. It's going to let you know what's going on with that. And here the timer is going to be much more important, right? I mean, if you have a purchase order, it's pretty important. You need to get some product out to one of your plants. It's time sensitive. If the timer is on and nobody's looking at that, then you're going to be very time sensitive. You're going to react to that. So you have new, accepted, rejected. You have any number of different things. We have filters that you can go ahead and filter it by. Any number of categories that you can use. So again, very, very similar to, in functionality to the RFQ one. Jason, anything you want to add to this one?
Nope. This one is, it's it's just the next step in your business process, but from a portal perspective, it's very similar data, maybe just a little more refined.
Yeah, and when you have things like rejected, by the way, you'll notice one of the things in the status is rejected. If they reject the PO, one of the things that it absolutely, why don't we go ahead and hit one of those view PDF, Jason?
Okay.
One thing it's going to do is it's going to force you, and this is just obviously it's a test document. So when he gets out of this, it's going to, if he rejects this, it's going to actually force him to give a reason. That's okay, Jason. It will actually force the user to give a reason. So you can't just reject it and not say anything. It's going to force it to communicate with your system as to why you're rejecting it. So again, the buyer can respond. And then finally, on the last bit of this, let's go ahead and go into the update. Okay, Jason, thanks. A lot of companies who deal in things that are time sensitive and really want updates on what's going on with shipments becomes very important to them. We can do PO updates. So what that means is that's your company, requesting an update from the vendor. So you have things, and in this case, we have things that all have critical expediting. So, say you have some time critical thing, you're running a power plant and you need some coal to run your power plant. Well, if that coal shipment doesn't show up in time, you got a problem. So it's very important to you. So you may not wait to find out what's going on. You may request from that vendor, give me an update, tell me what's going on with this shipment. Is it going to be on time? What's the case? So we'll go ahead and pick one, and we'll go ahead and we'll hit update selected, and you'll see what happens here. So now it asks you for status, and again, there's a demo system. It's configurable. You can put in whatever you want, but there's a drop down here. What's the status? Tell me what the status is. To be shipped. It's already shipped. There's a new delivery date. New delivery date. So now you're going to have to give a reason for that, and you're going to have to tell them what the new delivery date is, which you can pick up from a menu. It could be a supplier delay. Pick your date, any remarks. In this case, it requires that you put in some kind of remark, and then send the update. So what it's doing is, and you wouldn't do this certainly with every PO, but for those POs where you really, in certain industries, where it's very important for you to track that and understand and make sure those shipments are coming in on time, this is a very proactive thing you can do where, again, you're going out and reaching out to your suppliers and saying, hey, please let me know what's going on with this purchase order. Please give me an update. If everything's copacetic, fantastic. But if there is some kind of a delay, you're taking a very proactive approach. You're going to know what's going on ahead of time.
And Jim, I'd just like to add too here, and this was actually also true of pretty much all of the forms we've seen. Is they're very responsive. So if it's to be shipped, you'll see the data changes. If it's shipped, it's gonna ask for a tracking number and a carrier. And so we can really, depending on what the particular condition is, we can make sure that you're getting the information that you need from the supplier. So of course, right now, this would be the supplier's view. So I've failed to deliver a PO, an order on time. Perhaps I'm not even late yet, but maybe it's something critical to the continuity of my business. We do work for energy companies, for example, and components for nuclear power plants get put on the critical list pretty early, for example. So this provides your suppliers a way to say, oh, no, it's okay, you're going to be fine. Here's what's going on. It's going to be shipped, and here's when I expect it to be shipped, and everything should be just fine. Or if you do have a problem, perhaps give your suppliers an opportunity to get that information out to you, and then you can make decisions accordingly.
Super. Thank you, Jason. So again, it's not for everybody, but there are certainly folks out there that have a lot of value in that, based on the type of business they're in, the type of industry they're in. This can be a very powerful tool.